Hello and welcome to episode 269 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. We are not here to look back. We are not here to rehash our mistakes. We are here to be a forward-thinking show and discuss our rest of season top 150. Joining me for these pods each and every week are the two young men you know and love. It is Mike Leone of the Establish the Edge pod of analytics, directing fame of other Virgin activities. And it is our projections lead in the midst of dreaded overlap season between NFL and NBA. It is Mark Dankenbring. Leone, how's it going today?
Going well. Tough Bills loss this week, but as you said, we're on to week 7.
Imagine caring how a bunch of guys who make zillions of dollars and don't care about you doing their football game on Sunday. But okay, Mark, how's it going today?
Things are good. Woke up at about 7 a.m. this morning, and we had already fired off 4 NBA props picks, up to 14 in the first 2 days of the season. So crossover season in full effect, and should be a great time.
Yes, exactly. I also woke up to some blasting of NBA props. Get to that in a second. On today's show, we are going to talk player outlooks for the rest of the season. In other words, if you were drafting today, what would our rankings look like? If you are an in-season subscriber, you have access to our weekly rest of season top 150, which comes out each Wednesday. Factors in injuries, buys, schedule, and most importantly, change in roles, usage, etc. I think it's good for best ball tournaments that are going on. I think it's good for season-long trades, and it's just good to think about how we value players. Before we get into the show, reminder to everyone that the NBA started last night. It is incredibly difficult. I would say almost impossible probably to win in NBA DFS without help in the form of projections, ownership projections that update continuously with the news. And that last part is so important. Just tracking the news in NBA is a full-time job. So check out our NBA DFS subscription. Also, we have a separate NBA props product we are doing right now through the subscriber-only Discord. If you want to bet NBA player props, check out the subscribe page. Went 3-1 on opening night. Shout out to us. Okay. Rest of season top 150. We're starting to get some guys, Leone, who have already gotten their buys behind them. In other words, Calvin Ridley already has his buy behind him. And I think that affects his ranking somewhat. I think people forget, though, when they're doing these rankings that like just because your guy has a buy doesn't mean you take a 0. You have a replacement player in your lineup. So how do we factor in buys when we're doing the rest of season top 150?
Yeah, as you noted, you want to factor in the replacement player level. So if Calvin Ridley, if we have him averaging, 16 PPR points per game, you can kind of figure out like off the wire, you can generally get a wide receiver that's like 9 PPR points per game. So you lose 7 points for 1 week. And that's kind of one of those things where it's going to reduce the value of the players that still have bye weeks left a little bit. But as we say each week with this show, so much of this stuff is dependent on the context of your team and where your team is at. So if you're in the hunt for a playoff spot and you need to get over the hump, trading for players like Ridley, who's buy behind them, is, important. Like getting that extra week of knowing you have Ridley is a pretty big deal. If you're, 6-0, you could kind of care less that, one of your players still has a buy upcoming because you'll be able to eat an L and be okay. So just keep in mind like the context of your specific team and your league playoff formats.
Sure, exactly. And how much depth you have on your team, I think makes sense also.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about some guys specifically here. I think Chuba Hubbard is one of our biggest movers up. I don't know what's going on with Christian McCaffrey. They said he was going to be back, looked like he was going to come back. Then he sits down and then they put him on IR. So, gets into this spot where we don't know exactly what's going on with Christian McCaffrey at this point. I suspect he'll be back in 2, 3, 4 weeks, but we'll see. In the meantime, since Rodney Smith has been gone, Chuba Hubbard's role has been absolutely awesome. I don't want to go ahead and label him 90% CMC, but come on, let's be honest here. He's gonna perform very, very well. Mark, how are we thinking about Chuba now? And do you have a feel for when Christian McCaffrey will be back?
Well, yeah, so McCaffrey's out at least 2 more weeks after missing this past game. IR, you're out at least 3 games. The snap numbers have been awesome for Chuba. As you mentioned, not quite 90% CMC in my opinion. I would say maybe more about 75% CMC, just because the pass catching capabilities aren't quite what we saw from Mike Davis last year. Mike Davis, more of a veteran, and we've seen rookies struggle a little bit more in pass protection and just kind of staying on the field and understanding their pass block assignments and routes and all that good stuff. Chuba's been relatively inefficient on his targets thus far, just 82 yards on 19 targets and has 4 drops. So don't love that, but the rush share has been top notch. Royce Freeman hasn't really factored in maybe as much as we were expecting early on. And as you mentioned, Rodney Smith is out of the picture there. So while I'm excited about Chuba Hubbard moving forward, I think he just falls more in that RB2 range. The Panthers still have relatively rough offensive line situation, and the pass catching capabilities aren't quite, again, what we saw from Mike Davis last year. So I think he's a solid RB2 moving forward, but not sure the upside is really there to be a top 5 or top 10 RB.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, Matt Rule and the Panthers have lost 3 straight. And these games they lost to the Eagles and the Vikings, I mean, they had very, very good chances to win both of them, but either lost 3 straight and Matt Rule's like, we're going to recommit to the run, blah, 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 for whatever that's worth. They do have good matchups coming up in these 2 weeks that we know McCaffrey is going to be out, Giants and then Falcons for Chuba Hubbard. So in these short-term fixes, I think Chuba makes sense. We'll see on McCaffrey. To Courtland Sutton, Leone, because I've been playing Sutton a ton in GPPs in DFS. He always seems to be under-owned relative to his ceiling. Dude is just a baller, and while Jerry Jeudy is out. Now, Jerry Jeudy could be back week 8. I believe his window to return has opened up. Obviously, that takes a hit for Courtland Sutton. How do we factor all that into the top 150? There's certainly a lot of moving parts here ahead of their game on Thursday.
Yeah, I think heading into the year, we were higher on Jeudy than Sutton, just given Judy's prospect profile, entering that year 2 breakout, and Sutton returning from an injury. There was a little bit of uncertainty. Also felt a little bit like Teddy Bridgewater was a better fit for Jerry Jeudy. Now you fast forward to where we are in the season, and the Sutton injury concerns are pretty much out the window. Judy's the one coming back from injury, and we've seen Sutton contribute basically all over. Like, he has a really high target share back-to-back weeks with the 28% plus target share. That's his 3rd week out of 6 where he's had a target share of at least that amount, and it's been really high since that first game when Jeudy got hurt. He's also seen a pretty solid ADOT. I know we played him in a GPP this last week in DFS, and he scored 25 DraftKings points with Teddy Bridgewater, just completely missing him on a 60-yard touchdown that he was wide open, burning people down the field. I think he was the leader in air yards for the week at wide receiver, or at least that I might have seen that before all the games had finished, so someone might have passed him. But I just think the upside here is pretty strong, and Teddy's been supporting a little bit more pass volume than I initially expected, even though Denver is still negative in pass rate over expectation.
Yeah, I still have the take that Jerry Jeudy was the better athlete, the better prospect, and fit better with Teddy. I have concerns that even though Jeudy is expected back week 8, week 9, something like that, this ankle injury that he had is so severe that, like, I don't know, it scares me that for his health going forward. So I'd certainly take Sutton ahead. I'd probably have the gap a little bit tighter than we have it now personally, but this is a group effort, and we have Sutton currently 52nd overall, Jeudy 92nd overall.
Yeah, the injury guys too, it feels like the timelines on a lot of these players are somewhat up in the air, which has made them particularly difficult to rank. I mean, we talked about Hubbard, but like even CMC, Mark and I were trying to figure out where to rank him, because when he's back and healthy, he's like, there's no one who's a better fantasy asset. There's just no one who gets that utilization. There's not even that much variance to it like there is, with another guy like Derrick Henry, who's like, belongs up there, obviously, but there's a little bit more variance in the touchdowns, the yards per carry and stuff. Whereas at least in a PPR league, like Christian McCaffrey is going to be a top 2, top 3 player almost no matter what if he's healthy. So he was really, challenging to rank because we don't know when he's going to be back. Having a setback and going on IR, not a great sign. But when he does come back, there's almost no one else you'd rather have in fantasy.
Yeah, obviously. Totally agree. Okay. Speaking of injured guys, we mentioned Jeudy. Let's talk about Antonio Gibson for a second. And I talked about this with Silva yesterday. Like, this Washington football team is bad. And that is not good for Antonio Gibson, because when you play through a stress fracture in your shin like you do, I mean, you need rest. And once they're 3-8 or 3-9 or something like that, like, how much longer are they going to push Antonio Gibson on the stress fracture? We already saw him leave last week's game and give up all the work to J.D. McKissick. And also J.D. McKissick has played really, really well. So we have Antonio Gibson now down to RB 16. He would scare me even in that spot still. But what do you think, Mark? I know it's hard with these injury guys.
I mean, the thesis with Antonio Gibson this year, is we thought Washington would be a top 3 defense. They'd play with the lead a lot. He'd get a ton of volume when he's out there. Obviously, we were worried about the third down work, but we were hoping he would eat into McKissick a little bit more this season, and just nothing, has played as we were expecting. So we've dropped him quite a bit, and now he's dealing with this stress fracture in the shin. I think he injured his calf and left that game a couple times this past weekend. So it just hasn't been the formula we were hoping for fantasy success. And I'm not sure it'll get much better now that he's nursing these injuries. Almost just kind of want them to potentially shut him down for a couple of weeks, hopefully heal up, and then be more of the RB1 we were hoping for early on in the season. But, you likely spent a second round pick to get him this year. And I just don't think he's going to return that value.
Yeah. I think Jerry's going nuts for Antonio Gibson. I think that one thing about Antonio Gibson is that even if he's healthy, his role is not the quote unquote access to legendary role. Like, he's not taking the passing work from JD McKissick anyway. So even if you think he miraculously gets healthy, it's still a bit scary for Antonio Gibson.
He's a good example of something we talked about a couple weeks, I think, in regards to handcuff running backs, but it applies to all players where you're weighting that upside case just a little bit less each week. Each week we're weighting more like what is the actual role now? There's less time for the upside to materialize. And as Mark said, the upside that we had baked into Gibson, we didn't know if he was going to hit it. We knew it was there, but he's not, none of it's playing out. None of it's coming to fruition. So we can't weight that as strongly as we did prior to the season, even the injury stuff aside.
Okay, one guy we moved over Antonio Gibson is James Robinson. And we saw last week that James Robinson had 100% of the running back touches. Carlos Hyde was pushed to the back burner. I don't know if that was a conscious decision from Urban Meyer. We don't know if it's going to be sticky, but at this point, I'd certainly rather have James Robinson than Antonio Gibson. And you can make a case that James Robinson is a really elite fantasy asset now if he has the Najee Harris role. First, I want to hear Mark's take on this whole James Robinson thing. Can we believe in Urban? And then you can go ahead and throw it to Leone.
For sure. I wasn't a huge fan of James Robinson coming into the season just because I thought the volume would obviously be dialed back a little bit. But looking into his peripherals and just kind of his usage heading into or updating our top 150 this week, I was really impressed just by what I saw. I mean, he's top 10 in carries, inside the 10 and the 5 across the NFL this season. He's third in PFF's elusive rating behind only Nick Chubb and Javonte Williams, who we know are just elite elusive backs and breaking tackles. We saw him get 100% of the running back touches in week 6. So the volume that we did not expect to be there and that we saw last year, it has returned for James Robinson. So that's a huge, benefit to him. And Carlos Hyde, I know we were worried about him potentially taking some carries inside the 5 and inside the 10, down near the goal line. But that really hasn't happened. So I think we should be, aggressive on James Robinson moving forward. We have him slotted right behind Nick Chubb right now. And you can make the case that he could be ahead of Nick Chubb. But I think with Kareem Hunt going on IR, Nick Chubb's role could really expand in the next couple of weeks once he returns from injury. Hopefully he's back in week 8. But yeah, all signs are pointing up for James Robinson. I think the only, question still is just about that offensive environment and if the Jaguars are going to continue to play from behind in a majority of their games. But other than that, the volume has been great. He's clearly surpassed Carlos Hyde, and it just doesn't seem like anything can get in his way to being at least an RB2.
And I mean, one of the things we discussed in regards to Darrell Henderson last week was this group of running backs after the top guys. It looks like a big gap between 14 and 36, but actually, even if you cut Gibson out of that, between 14 and 30, it's really tight. I think we even had Zeke in that group last week and once again, Darrell Henderson, we moved him up 14 spots, but you could argue he could be even higher. So I think these running backs become a little bit interchangeable. It's so much is just going to depend on their health and that volume sticking there.
Okay, let's go to the Arizona wide receiver situation. I know DeAndre Hopkins people are worried, and I was worried about DeAndre Hopkins before the season. People were laughing at me. I said it's gonna make a difference. You can't add Rondale Moore and AJ Green and expect it not to make a difference in DeAndre Hopkins' target share. And the more wide receivers you have on the field at a time, the more viable options there are for routes. And now they've added Zach Ertz into the mix as well. So I know there's a lot of DeAndre Hopkins people worried out there. He's coming off of a 2-touchdown game, though. So, like, my take on Tuesday with Silva was, hey, we can maybe sell DeAndre Hopkins now. Leone, what do you think about DeAndre Hopkins? We added Ertz to the mix, and DeAndre Hopkins has this sub 20% target share right now.
Yeah, I was one of the people that was more optimistic than you coming into the year, but we're now 6 weeks in, and I think last week we said we dropped him a little bit. Each week we see the target share down, we'll drop him further, and then he comes in with a 13% target share last week, and that's what we did. We dropped him further. So I'm 100% with you where this is a sell window. The efficiency seems like it's going to be pretty good. Kyler's playing out of his mind. It seems like Hopkins is going to have more efficiency on a little bit of a reduced role, but looking at the receivers around him, I mean, we're arguably, still even a little bit hot on him. We're like him versus CeeDee Lamb and DJ Moore is pretty close. So I think you could even drop him maybe a couple of spots. I'd probably have him ahead of Metcalf with the injury to Russell Wilson. But yeah, it's a really good sell window. I'd much rather bank on wide receiver elite volume than elite efficiency lasting. And you're going to get way more volume from like Calvin Ridley, for example. So if you can get him, or if people are panicking on Diggs, if you can get something close to that, I think that'd be a huge win.
Yeah, we have Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, Big Mike Williams ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, and we have Hopkins just ahead of Lamb and DJ Moore. I agree with you. I think it's close on those guys. I mean, the way that Dallas's defense is playing and their run game is playing and all their other options, Gallup coming back, like I could see CeeDee's target share being a bit unstable week to week as well. But yeah, I think I prefer CeeDee and DJ Moore there slightly over DeAndre Hopkins. Certainly some interesting guys in that range, though, at wide receiver.
Just to hit on the efficiency, case for Hopkins a little bit more. He has 10 targets inside the red zone. He's caught 6 of them. All 6 have gone for touchdowns. So obviously not all of his catches inside the red zone are going to end up as touchdowns moving forward. And then also we kind of throw out, he's only at 19% target share when he was close to 30% last year. But just to put that into perspective, 10% of targets when Kyler is throwing between 30 to 40 times a game is 3 to 4 targets per game. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge difference when we're talking about wide receivers, and it's really hard to overcome that lack of volume with sustained efficiency.
Oh yeah. Very good point there, especially on the red zone efficiency so far. Let's talk about Rashod Bateman. Rashod Bateman comes out of the gate, and Sammy Watkins wasn't there, but Sammy Watkins earned targets. Rashod Bateman earned targets in his first game. I thought that was a really good sign for him. Obviously, he has the first round draft capital behind him. Really good prospect profile. What do you think, Mark, after Rashod Bateman's first game? How excited would you be about him for the rest of the season?
I think relatively excited, but nothing crazy. I think he can probably slot into the wide receiver 3 or 4 range. The 8 out wasn't exceptional out there. I think it was about a little under 8 yards. Marquise Brown is going to be more of the downfield threat there. So I'm not a huge prospect guy. I know Pat Kerrane was really high on him. So I kind of trust his evaluation and like him from that standpoint. And we have seen Baltimore throw it a lot more this year with their backfield kind of a mess. So, I don't, if he's on the waiver wire, I think he's certainly someone you should pick up and stash, especially with these bye weeks moving forward. With Watkins coming back, I'm not sure how that split's going to go as well. And so I think the best case scenario here is he's the third target behind Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. And he might end up being, kind of that 3.5 range mixing in with Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, I'm always skeptical about being too high on Lamar Jackson wide receivers, especially as they add more and more target competition for him. We have Michael Thomas ahead of Rashod Bateman. We have Michael Gallup ahead of Rashod Bateman, Landry, Rondale, Hardman, Mooney. I definitely agree with all those, especially Michael Thomas. So I think it's really rare to be able to just insert a guy into your lineup who could get 30% of the targets. And I know the Saints are playing really run heavy, but I think Michael Thomas is an awesome stash right now. Okay. 2 more things we got to hit on here. First one is the Dallas Goedert situation. With Zach Ertz gone, obviously Dallas Goedert is going to take a leap forward in his usage. He was splitting, and they were kind of canceling each other out, Ertz and Goedert. Goedert has good talent, man. And he also, I don't know if you saw the video of him just getting absolutely wrecked in a bar fight, which was interesting as well. However, Dallas Goedert has the role to himself now, Leone. But Jalen Hurts has been up and down as a thrower. In real life, Jalen Hurts hasn't been great. What do you think about Goedert going forward now that he has the job to himself?
I'm pretty optimistic on Goddard. Have always liked his skill set, and now with Ertz gone, I think you can pencil him in for maybe like 1.5x what he was doing, which was okay. This is a team that is top 5 in the NFL in pass rate over expectation. Surprisingly, granted, scrambles are included in those pass plays, so not all of those are netting out into pass attempts, but they're still throwing more than we expected. In the games that Ertz and Goddard played together, they were at like a 22%-ish target share combined. So if we give Goddard, a mid to high teens target share, I think that's a pretty big deal. So I'm in on Goddard. I think I'd probably try to be aggressive with Goddard before we see some good results from him.
Yeah, for sure. And I like Goddard too. I always thought Goddard's talent was unique at the tight end position. I would say that they do have this kid Tyree Jackson, who I know they like, who I think they're going to get into the mix some. They just re-signed my friend from the pickup basketball games, Richard Rogers. They just re-signed him to the practice squad, and he had some good games for them last year. I still always think about playing with Richard Rogers. Like, he was going kind of hard for someone who had like a few more NFL years ahead of him. Like, he really could have gotten hurt in these games, like playing against people like me. I mean, it's insane. It really was insane. I couldn't believe he was doing it. Okay. Last thing I want to hit on before we get out of here is Cooper Kupp, like the actual god. So it's actually like, it's hard to poke any hole whatsoever in Cooper Kupp. We now have him 10th overall among all fantasy players, rest of the season, top 150. Cooper Kupp 10th overall, the wide receiver 3, only behind Devontae Adams, only behind Tyreek Hill. I guess it's certainly not a fluke. I can't really say anything bad about Cooper Kupp. I was lucky enough to just be like, screw it. Cooper Kupp is our king of ceiling games, king of slate breaking games. I better play him this past week, and it worked out. I can't say that I thought it was like a slam dunk, though, if you go back and listen to the solo pod. So I don't know, Mark. Is Cooper Kupp officially broken the PSM and is our god?
I think so. It's been pretty unbelievable, just his metrics across the board. When you look at it, he's only had one game below a 31.5% target share this year, and came in at 27%. So just the floor there has been insane. And then he's getting the looks where we want him too. I mean, he's tied with Stephon Diggs and Chris Godwin for most targets inside the red zone with 12. Tied with our favorite boy Zach Pascal for most targets inside the 10-yard line with 7. So he's just getting all the opportunity that we could possibly want out of a fantasy wide receiver. We're confident in this offense moving forward. Clearly things are clicking well there with Matthew Stafford inserted and his relationship with Sean McVay. So, the Breakfast Club, I think we just have to move that up, the narrative street here at ETR.
Yes, the bacon and egg slider is being implemented into the models right now. Leone, how tilted are you that Cooper Kupp is now ahead of Stephon Diggs, your boy, in the rest of season top 150?
I mean, it hurt me to do it. I didn't really want to have it be that way. I think Mark even had him a couple spots higher initially, and I brought him down. And I have no concerns over Diggs whatsoever. But to Mark's point, if you look at the target share by week for Kupp, 39%, 37%, 32%, 32%, 27%, 40%. It's nuts. And it's the exact opposite of Hopkins, where we're like, each week Hopkins has a lower than expected target share. We're sliding him down. With Kupp, it's like, we've been arguably conservative sliding him up, and then he hits us with a 40% target share game. We have no evidence to suggest this is going to be like maybe it's been in the past where he's had a few hot weeks and then it's evened up with him and Robert Woods.
Yeah, totally agree. He is indeed our god. Okay, that is going to do it for this edition of the rest of season top 150 pod. If you're an in-season subscriber, you can check out the full top 150 on the site at any time. Don't forget about NBA props as we continue to blast off there. For producer Adam, for Mark, for Leone, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.